Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is Jim Grisanzio from the Oracle Groundbreakers team, and we are doing a series of interviews, about 30 or so interviews with the speakers from Oracle Groundbreakers India Yatra, which is a conference that took place last week. It's taking place this week, and we'll go into next week as well. So I'm with Sanjay Goil here, and Sanjay is VP of Product Management, and Sanjay is doing a talk in a couple of days on microservices. Sanjay, welcome. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Jim. Great to be here.
Nice to be here. This is actually take two. For some reason, Zoom flaked just a moment ago, so we're going to do this all over again. So we were talking briefly, and I was just reminding, it was nice having a conversation with you earlier that we're both from Sun, me previously, and you from a couple of jobs back. So let's talk about microservices. Let's talk about the community. We'll talk about the conference. But first, before we get going, since this is our first meeting, just give me a little bit of summary of who you are and where you come from, what you do.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Thanks for having me. So I'm in the database team. I work on messaging and microservices. And messaging allows events to come into the database. And so these are the two things that I work on. I have been at Oracle about 2 years. I came in to run the AI service and was also part of the datascience.com due diligence to acquire that company. And I briefly was in OCI before coming into the database team. So I'm giving a talk, in a few days, and I'm excited to be part of the Yatra. On the talk is on microservices. Prior to Oracle, I was at a startup doing ad tech. Before that, big data at HP. Developer tools at Intel. Again, the thread has been high performance computing and big data and AI. I'm applying that application systems knowledge into building, the whole application development paradigm, which is microservices now, onto the Oracle database.
Okay, great. So Building Microservices with the Oracle Converged Database. That's the title of your talk a couple of days from now. Let's just, so give me a summary of what you're talking about, microservices.
Yeah, I think the microservices is the modern paradigm, right? So people talk about microservices and then they give examples of, Netflix and Uber and LinkedIn, right? So they're building their services, their applications with 1,000, 1,400 microservices. And again, the paradigm is for, agility. The paradigm is for having a small team with a certain function. Right? And people don't think about, the persistence layer, the database, or where you should put your data. And the Converged database, right? So the Oracle now, apart from relational data, can bring in document data, right? The JSON format, spatial data, graph data, right? All these time series data, all this data can come into the database, right? So the Converged database becomes a great tool to simplify building these microservices. Traditionally people talk about Lambda or Kappa architectures where, you have special purpose databases for each type and the data flows along, various dimensions, many copies of the data. Security is a problem, backup is a problem. But again, what I'm going to cover is simplicity of building these applications. And, it's a hands-on lab session. So hopefully we can walk through a live example for the participants.
Yeah, actually, I've spoken to a lot of speakers so far for the event, and you're only the second one that's doing a hands-on lab, which is really good. Because it's always, you learn by doing. You mentioned earlier before we started recording that in terms of, most people aren't that aware, or maybe I misunderstood, most people aren't really that aware to see the association with database and microservices. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's correct, right? So again, there's a whole serverless aspect to microservices, and these are mainly event-driven, right? So an event happens, an IoT event happens, or some mobile event happens, and that data kind of flows into an application. The application triggers an action, and that action then is the end of that microservices role for it, right? So event-driven action, but there's no persistence around it. Right now, if you move that into an enterprise setting, right, when you're moving money or you're doing, supply chain, workflows, ERP workflows, even travel booking type of workflows, there are, some transactions, there are some persistent data types that need to come in. And, these are a mix of data types. When an order comes in, it could be a JSON order, this kind of the complexity of expressing that in JSON. And so people don't think about, the persistence layer. They try to maintain some of that in the middleware, which becomes, it's like writing a database layer in the middleware. Why would you do that if there is a database that is, built upon, providing you some of these paradigms, the APIs, to do some, the work of keeping the data persistence and also giving the transactional ability, right? So we believe that, by putting a combination of the application layer and the database layer simplifies these microservices.
Okay. Now you mentioned this is a hands-on lab. Is this mostly for DBAs or for developers or some combination?
I think mainly, yeah, I think various people will get a value out of it, right? So developers, architects, DBAs, and it's a hands-on lab. We take mobile food delivery, right? If you're familiar with Uber Eats or DoorDash, right? We're calling this GrubDash as an app, right? And we take OCI, like Oracle Cloud Infrastructure services, right? So you basically set up VMs, some Docker containers. You use OKE or Kubernetes engine to manage the app layer. Then you connect to the autonomous database, right? So again, kind of get the layers of the application and then the database. You set the thing up, and then we show you how to search recommendations. Like, if you want to search your very favorite sushi from, places around you, you can then, look at Yelp recommendations. You can order, and the order goes through, checking inventory. That inventory then kind of, says, yes, I'm here. The delivery service then looks at spatial data because, the deliverer needs to know an address to go to. So that's the combination of, you see text, you see spatial data, you see JSON data and all that stuff, right? So again, working through this example, I believe, we can, and we have labs now online, right? So there are live labs that, we'll have people walk through. So like you said, learning by doing is kind of the paradigm here.
Yeah. So, I'm just interested also to know, I've been to sort of several, hack fests or, labs which are sort of in person though. You have a team of engineers, 4 or 5 engineers, you have a lab, you're, in the same room with maybe 15 or 20 other engineers. And then you work on projects for, hours, several hours. But now that everything is virtual, how do you do it now? Because there's a lot of, from what I observed, there's a lot of human interaction, a lot of people sitting behind the same screen.
Yeah. So I actually, it's funny you ask this because this work that we have been doing for the last 6 months started off by doing, by planning a hands-on workshop right before COVID hit in Japan, with Hitachi and Fujitsu. The Japan team asked us to come in and do a day-and-a-half workshop to build microservices, and we started going, that route. And suddenly we realized that, we couldn't travel. We were supposed to come to Japan on March 15th, and Japan was, I think, one of the first ones to start shutting down before, things happened the way they did. So we started, focusing more on self-service, and there was a initiative within the database team to build learning library for these labs, right? So we got a lot of help from our colleagues who then were able to QA the labs that we built and walk through the labs, right? So the motion of setting up OCI resources, the motion of the order database, the inventory database, the delivery database, right? So again, the application. So we believe we have a set of labs that people can do, and I'll cover some of them in the presentation, but people can then go after the presentation and do it themselves, right? And we'll establish them Slack channels Like we have this database at home event that we did where we covered a bunch of these things, and there's a Slack channel there. So I'll share that Slack channel for people to come in and ask questions, right? So again, it's of course as not as interactive as in-person session, but I think people once they get through the couple of hours get initiated into it, can then carry on and have an ability to interact with us later on as well.
So the session is a couple of hours long then?
Yeah, that's it. I think I believe it's a 2-hour session.
2-hour session. Okay. Well, I mean, that gives you enough time to get pretty deeply into it, and it's really good that you continue the relationship on afterwards. So,
right, and we'd love the feedback, right? Again, this is work in progress. We have basically a set of labs, but we can continue to grow. We want to bring in other aspects like blockchain and sharding and other things into the lab. So again, I believe it's a good platform, mainly because it exposes the app layer, the scaling, the database layer, and its richness in terms of just not mobile food ordering, but it could be taken into retail and energy and finance. People building microservices can benefit from it.
Right. You mentioned the Database at Home conference. I guess that was last month or a little bit longer ago. I heard about that. I heard it went very well. Is that going to be something that's going to be regular?
Yeah, so we did a couple of them. So this was part of the database PM team, and we did one in May and one in June. So it was not as far back, like June 25th was the second one. So the second one was mainly data-driven applications, where we picked up this whole set of the Grub Dash application, and had various speakers talk about how to build data-driven applications. And when you talk about data-driven applications, the modern paradigm there is to build microservices. Mm-hmm. And data-driven, is you can call them data-centric, but they're also event-driven, right? So when an event happens, it triggers in some ways, right? So I use these interchangeably: data-driven, event-driven, data-centric. And the Database at Home event kind of was a 6-hour event where there was a keynote, and then we covered the microservices architecture, and there were various speakers who come in and talk about, this is how you take text data. So it explained the queries, the setup behind each of the labs that we'll cover in the hands-on lab. And that's on YouTube. So, it's available, and, I'll be sharing that link for, the participants so they can actually see that event.
Right. Interesting. Okay. All right, Sanjay, thank you very much for coming by. It was really great to talk to you. It was great to meet you, and meeting all kinds of new people at this event, even though it's all virtual. So hopefully maybe next year or the year after, I'll see you in India for Sangam or something like that.
I look forward to that. Yeah, thanks for having me, Jim. It's been a pleasure.
Great. Talk to you soon now. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye now.